New York City mayoral race frontrunner Andrew Yang taking a lot of heat for suggesting the state hold off on spending all of its federal stimulus aid. Candidate Maya Wiley's campaign even compared Yang to a, quote, mini Trump.
Founder of Nuestro PAC, president and founder of Solidarity Strategies, author of Tio Bernie, and former senior advisor to the Sanders campaign, Chuck Rocha, and White House reporter for Real Clear Politics, Philip Wegman. They join us now to discuss. Chuck, it's very interesting to me watching the New York City Democratic establishment deal with Andrew Yang. At the beginning, they ignored him. Now he's basically at the top of every single poll. Not only there, but even within ranked choice voting, he seems to be overwhelmingly popular in a way that they are simply not. And they have no idea how to deal with him. They're hitting him with insult after insult. None of it seems to stick. What do you think this tells us about politics as a veteran observer?
Well, there's one thing you can't buy enough of, and that is name ID. No matter how much these folks who are all running for New York mayor, people don't know who they are. Their inner circle does, and some of the people within their own cliques in politics know who they are. But en masse, Andrew Yang got a lot of benefit out of running for president. And as a political consultant, it's just, that there's nothing better than name ID. People were always like, well, it's Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden at the top of the premise because everybody knew Bernie Sanders because we had run before. And everybody knew Joe Biden because he had been vice president. It's the same thing with Andrew Yang. When folks want to tell you it's about ideas or about platform, it ain't. Right now, it's just about name ID in a race where nobody knows who nobody else is.
That is a very good point. And that's actually kind of what his opponents have been banking on, Phil, is this idea that, okay, once it gets closer and people start to pay attention, we start to spend money on TV and we start to define Andrew Yang, then things are going to come our way. It hasn't worked out so far. And I have to tell you, the way that they're approaching this, multiple of these candidates who are trailing right now are really trying to hit him hard. Calling him a mini Trump is just like really silly and ridiculous. But also what a lot of voters are saying that they like about Yang is that he's kind of the happy warrior, out there cheerfully meeting with everybody and talking about his plans. And he's got that energy about him. He had it during the presidential campaign, too. So if he's out there as the happy warrior and all his opponents are getting into the mud and getting nasty and aggressive, I don't know how well that strategy is going to work out for them.
And can we just pause and note that calling Andrew Yang a mini Trump is probably the worst way to attack him? I mean, nothing could be farther from the fact. He's just a happy guy who has his set of policies that he likes to nerd out on. He has some really weird ideas. But again, like you mentioned, Crystal, he's a nice guy. He's the farthest thing from Donald Trump that you could imagine. I think what we're going to see is, yes, criticism comes because he's the front runner, like Chuck pointed out, or like one of you pointed out a second ago. But I think the larger test here is sort of a nice guy test. Can Andrew Yang win a political contest as a nice guy? I think that certainly right now, because of the name ID, because of his standing in the polls, we can say that nice guy strategy is working for him. And his opponents are going to have to find better fodder for attacks than calling him Donald Trump, because I don't think that's going to work. I think that actually helps him because voters are going to say that's the farthest thing from true.
Yeah, they're going to be like, what are you talking about? And Chuck, I'm curious from your perspective, having run the outsider campaigns several times here. With Yang, both the political establishment and the press have no idea what to do with him. And they have no idea how to brand him. Many of his advisors don't come from that world. They don't have relationships and more. They find it, from my experience, very uncomfortable. People asking me, actually, because they're like, well, you covered him for a long time. And I'm like, hey, he's a nice guy. He believes what he says. I'm curious from your perspective how that is translating in the election. Because, yes, he's got the name ID and more. But in terms of his relationship with the political establishment and the press, given your experience, how do you see that moving forward? We've got 10 weeks to go until the election.
I think it's about building a coalition that can actually win, and I think that relationship helps him. I think it helps him to be a little bit of an outsider, no matter how much the establishment and the press and other folks are upset that this person who they don't think, don't think that he should be the mayor, can cobble together a relationship in a multi-candidate primary in this field where there's not a whole lot of people that will vote. You start with his last name. When people walk into the ballot box, his picture will not be there, but his name will be. And not all Asians in New York are a monolith by no means, but he will get a lot of support because his name is Andrew Yang. You couple that with the Yang gang enthusiasm of folks on the ground who will probably show up because it is Andrew Yang. So if they have another third leg to that, if he could figure out if that's a progressive wing Yang or some other group or folks who just think he's a nice guy because he's kind of rose above it all. I think that's a winning combination that you can see scares everybody. And I promise you it shows in their polling. That's why you have now seen the attacks.
Yeah, I think Chuck's right. The question is, where is his ceiling? Because you've still got, Phil, a lot of voters who are undecided. So does this opposition, this sort of like united opposition against Andrew, does that coalesce those undecided voters among some other candidate? Part of the problem for the other candidates is that there are so many of the other candidates. There's not one anti-Andrew Yang choice, which just makes it a lot more difficult. But I'm also reminded, Phil, of the Democratic primary and the fact that it was really hard for any of the candidates to lay a glove on Joe Biden for kind of the same reasons. He had this affable, people liked him, they had good feelings about him from his time in the Obama White House. It's like Obama's wingman. And so it became really hard and uncomfortable for candidates to go after him. And the ones that did it normally didn't end up well for them. I mean, Kamala Harris, of course, notably took that big shot at him. Initially it inured to her benefit, then quickly she backslid and Biden stayed basically right where he was. Julian Castro came to mind, same deal, tried to go after him hard, didn't work out whatsoever. And so a lot of times when you take shots at someone who has kind of a general sense of goodwill around him, it doesn't work out for you.
I doubt that anyone who goes after Andrew Yang is going to get a plum spot in City Hall, but I don't know, maybe that'll be another parallel between this race and the Democratic primary. But look, I think that the question of ceiling is a good one, obviously, because there's still a lot of time between now and Election Day. As of right now, though, Andrew Yang, he seems to be holding his own for all of the reasons that we've outlined thus far. And if you are one of these New York candidates who for a long time has made the traditional relationships that you're supposed to, put together the traditional voting coalitions that you're supposed to, I think that there is going to be some resentment. And Andrew Yang has to steel himself for some nasty and brutish politics between now and the finish line.
Yeah, I think that's right. All right, more Team Rising for everybody right after this.